things. This is going to be a haul. This is going to take some time. But in the meantime, it seems to me the best thing I can do, in addition to try to get the Middle Eastern countries, including OPEC, to raise their production of oil and move along that route, is to see to it that we continue to grow our economy.
Secretary Yellen said recently that some of the tariffs on Chinese imports impose more harm on consumers and businesses and aren't very strategic. Do you share that view, and are you considering taking down some of those tariffs?
I'm talking with the Secretary when we get home. I am considering it. We did not impose any of those tariffs. They're imposed by the last administration, and they're under consideration.
We have to find out. I mean, look, our mother 5, a baby cries, we don't have food. Come on.
That's just
as
bad as it gets.
This is bad. It hits us home as deeply as possible.
The question about voter suppression and voter turnout is causation without correlation. I'm sorry, you can make mistakes even when you know what you're talking about. It's correlation without causation. We know that increased turnout has nothing to do with suppression.
More than 850,000 people cast a ballot in person or by mail in the Georgia primaries, a 168% increase compared to the same time period of the 2018 primary. That's according to Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger, who is seeking re-election this year.
As you recall, when we passed the Election Integrity Act of 2021, everyone said it was going to make it hard for people to vote. Well, the numbers prove them wrong, doesn't it?
The turnout defying predictions from many Democrats and voting rights activists that Georgia's new voting law could lead to a drop-off in voting. President Biden and Stacey Abrams, who's running unopposed in Georgia's Democratic gubernatorial primary, both likened the bill to Jim Crow last year.
When it comes to the gas prices, we're going through an incredible transition that is taking place, that God willing, when it's over, we'll be stronger and the world will be stronger and less reliant on fossil fuels when this is over.
Would you consider putting something more narrow on the floor addressing?
As I said, we are not going to backtrack. We are not going to support any kind of bill that will backtrack on the needs to protect a woman's right to choose, plain and simple. Last one.
The baby formula business, as you know, in the United States is dominated by 3 or 4 major players. The recall in Abbott happened back in February. President Biden only invoked the Defense Production Act last week. Why was the Biden administration so slow to respond to this crisis?
Well, we acted immediately.
We're talking about energy, talking about gas prices, talking about refining, but talk to us about just the risk of blackouts. Is this something that you are preparing yourself forward for coming into the summer?
Well, we're looking at anywhere where we may see physical supply disruptions. One of those areas right now is in diesel, particularly in the northeast of the U.S. We've been in a state of constantly monitoring and making sure that all the tools we have available are on warm standby to make sure that if we do see any physical outages or shortages, we're able to move and release reserves. As we go into the summer season, there's always risks. There's risks to the electricity grid.
You didn't want to get involved in the Ukraine conflict militarily for obvious reasons. Are you willing to get involved militarily to defend Taiwan if it comes to that?
Yes.
You are?
That's the commitment we made.
But then, during an appearance by the Quadrilateral Security Dialogue leaders, a CNN reporter asked President Biden about the longtime U.S. policy of strategic ambiguity on Taiwan.
Mr. President, is the policy of strategic ambiguity towards Taiwan dead?
No.
Could you explain?
No.
Senator, what was your response to what Mr. Biden said and then his follow-up to what he said that had a lot of people a bit upset on Capitol Hill?
It seemed to be a lot of yes-no sort of responses without a whole lot of explanation. I do think it's dangerous for President Biden to speak extemporaneously on foreign policy. I think it's risky. I think he should have either teleprompter notes or some strong notes or say, I'll get back to you after I consult with my staff. That's embarrassing, but it's even more embarrassing what we're seeing on the world stage.
How do you increase refinery capacity?
Well, it's a great question, and you're right that the war in Ukraine has has had the impact of not only taking the supply of Russian oil off of the market, but also reducing global refining capacity. I would say that the release of the Strategic Petroleum Reserve and galvanizing others to release, I think, certainly has had an impact on blunting the price run up in oil. We do have real tightness in refinery capacity. Part of that is here in the United States. The private sector shuttered and took down a lot of refinery capacity last year, and so we're needing them to build that back up. But the thing that we can do right now is focus on both how can we increase supply. It's important to continue to focus on how to increase supply of oil, but also particularly in this refined product environment.
A new report from the North American Electric Reliability Corporation shows 2/3 of the country at high or elevated risk of power outages this summer thanks to overworked power grids. Experts point to extreme weather due to climate change as a key issue, but some worry a growing dependence on less reliable clean energy sources is contributing to the grid's problems.
What we're seeing now is in our push to decarbonize, you're seeing certain forms of generation retire perhaps prematurely.
According to a recent NBC News poll, 75% of adults believe the country is headed in the wrong direction, and many place the blame squarely on the president and his party. Tonight, with the midterm election season heating up, tensions are mounting inside the Democratic Party and White House, with a growing cascade of crises, including the president's handling of border policy, soaring inflation, and fears of a recession.